Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So we do still have people trickling in, but if there's some gaps next to you, if you can kind of scoot down a little bit so people can still come in and not have to work their way across everyone. That'd be very helpful. Thank you. All right. Well, I know we still have some people coming in, but figure we can get started. We're already a little behind schedule. Just didn't want to stop the conversation. My name is Anne Marie Parkinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Santa Barbara County Fire Safe Council. We are a nonprofit whose mission is focused on promoting wildfire safety through education and action. It's through our partners, our grantors, and our members that we're able to provide wildfire mitigation services like chipping and grazing, and also host events like this. It is really great to see so many people here today concerned about preparing for wildfire. It is a really big risk in our community, as many of you know. I want to start off with a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, I wanted to thank our funders for making this event possible. That is the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the UCSB Wildfire Prevention and Policy Lecture Series, and NewsHawk. And I also want to give a big shout out to our staff who worked very hard over the past couple of weeks and months to pull this all together. And a big thank you to our board for assisting in the planning of today and being here to help the event run very smoothly. Second, there is no food allowed in the lecture hall, so if you brought any snacks, please save that until the break or until lunchtime. For questions, we will not be taking questions after each talk. Please save those until the end during the Q&A session. And everyone, in your packets, you have a little piece of paper so you can take notes, and you can also write down your questions so you don't forget them. You are welcome, though, to raise your hand if a presenter uses a term that you don't understand. I want to be able to clarify that for everyone. And then last thing, we do have surveys in your packets. I'd really appreciate if you guys spent the time to fill those out for us. It is our first time doing this event, and it will help us improve this in the future to know what you guys like, what you didn't like, and what you'd like to see more of. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce council member from the city of Santa Barbara, Mike Jordan. He'll give us some opening remarks.
I heard that, Lee Heller. Good morning. So if you don't know me, I'm the District 2 representative. You're in the middle of District 2, so welcome to the Mesa. I had a little bit of a kerfuffle this morning. I got a 2-day calendar reminder of May 20th. Anybody in here are Mesa residents and knows the significance of May 20th? In 2 days, if you were sitting in here at 9 o'clock at night and went back 4 years and walked out the door and looked across the street, it would have looked like the world was ending and a wall of fire was coming towards you. And it was the Loma fire. And it really portends the importance of events like this. If you want to get a city fire chief to talk about his worst nightmares, you take him out to Mesa Cafe for pancakes one Saturday morning, feed him syrup until his eyes glaze over, and you talk about the fires and the nightmares. But we were blessed that night, so to speak, by a fire that was being blown by the wind that reached the turn in the hill and had the wind stopped, and basically the fire was burning back on itself and allowed it to be put out by all the resources that were there. If that hadn't happened, that would have come down the ravine that is now Loma Alta Drive, which is a historic ravine, split out in that ravine behind Beach City Apartments and gone right down to the waterfront. It would have also turned the corner, re-energized itself in Hondo Valley Park, run horizontally across the hills in the Mesa, re-energized itself at Elings Park and Douglas Family Preserve, and made its way up Las Positas into Campanile Hills. I can't imagine if that would have happened, what you and I would be doing if you lived on the Mesa to be ready to prepare to evacuate. All the more talking about the importance of events like this. So thank you so much for being here. I'd like to say it's also just not about preparedness. There's another P word I'll use, and that's prevention. Eric Friedman and I share a border of districts on Las Positas. I have Las Positas this way, he has Las Positas that way, so he has up into Campanile, up into Yankee Farm, and all the way up the other side of Las Positas. And we're currently working with city fire staff to scope and bring a proposal to what we call the coastal high fire hazard zones that will bring an assessment district similar to what's up in the upper Riviera area, where we have the resources then to go into private property and help clear land. If you've never driven over and through Loma Alta Drive, the hillside that was on fire is about at an angle like this, near vertical. Impossible for any parcel owner to take care of clearing the brush, knocking down the fuel, and being ready for a fire. We hope to bring that resource and a decision to the property owners before the end of the year and be ready for next fire season. So if you're a Mesa resident and looking forward to that, if you're not one of my 1,200 households on my mailing list for newsletters, I will be here at least through the first break. I'm carrying a group of business cards. Happy to give you those. You can contact me and get on a mailing list or get on an email list for more information about that. So welcome. I hope my brief little Loma fire presses the importance of participating in events like this. And I also hope that you go home and you take that back to your neighbors, your family, your church group, your school groups. This is not the type of planning that happens when I knock on your door and say I'm from the government and I'm here to help. This is pure, yeah, right? This is pure grassroots neighborhood planning, and you need to participate in it, help those around you to do it, and I think special emphasis on those that you know will have trouble getting out of neighborhoods. The families with really small children and families with older people who don't move as fast or don't think as fast under stress like that. Thanks for the Fire Council for setting this up today and herding all the resources you see. Big shout out to City College. Who the heck has 5,000 or 10,000 people on campus last night for graduation and then opens up their facilities the next morning for an event like this? And it's our community college. So thank you.
Get started with talks by Jackie Ruiz, Raquel, Zick, and Brian Miller, talking about wildfire preparedness, what to know about evacuation.
Just give us 1 second. We'll be ready. There we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see all of you here for today's workshop. We're really excited to be here with you today. We'll start with introductions here. My name is Jackie Ruiz. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Santa Barbara County Office of Emergency Management. And I'll hand it over to my colleague.
Hi, everyone. Brian Miller. I'm a commander with the Santa Barbara Police Department. I've been with the agency for 18 years and currently the commander of the patrol division. Just personal experience with, the things we had going on in this town. I've been involved with evacuations when we had, our local incidents, and also as part of mutual aid requests down in Ventura County and also up in the Tahoe fires as far as personal experience with evacuations.
Hi, good morning. I'm Raquel Zick. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office. Not to be a one-upper, but I've been with the county for 20 years. And I have served for the Sheriff's Office as a patrol deputy, a 911 dispatcher, and in administration, and then now as the Public Information Officer. So my experience comes from each of those positions and numerous emergencies throughout the county in that time span, which shouldn't be bragging rights. So we're going to start by talking about kind of giving you an overview of how the background on decision making when it comes to evacuations. That decision making is made by a group of individuals, and ultimately you'll hear about it through the head of your law enforcement agency that has jurisdiction for wherever you're at. And these agencies that come together are our law enforcement partners, so that's going to be the agency that has jurisdictions. A lot of times these sometimes bridge over two areas. County Office of Emergency Management, Office of Emergency Services, the National Weather Service, because weather's a crucial part in a lot of these emergencies, and leadership from the county, city, and the California Highway Patrol, or any other relevant parties. And we throw that any other relevant parties in there because for each of these incidents, while there are people that are very obvious inclusion, each one is different, and so the consideration and the consideration is different for each one. And what's also helpful about that is that when these events happen, there's usually 10 different things that are all the number one priority, and by coming together as a group, we can kind of help support each other in accomplishing each of those tasks. So I'm going to kind of cover some of what the county jurisdictions are and kind of how that breaks down. It's important. Not everybody knows, who their head law enforcement agency is. So the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office is the law enforcement agency for all of the unincorporated areas of Santa Barbara County. So that's everything that's not pink. But additionally, we do cover some contract cities, so cities that pay us to provide their police services, and that's going to be Carpinteria, Buellton, Solvang, and Goleta. And then we also cover Isla Vista. So the ones that are outside of that is going to be Guadalupe Police Department, the Santa Maria Police Department, Lompoc Police Department, and Santa Barbara Police Department.
And so this slide shows the jurisdictional lines for the actual city of Santa Barbara. So if something happened within this area, then our city, our fire department, our police department, our departmental agencies within the city would take the lead on the incident that happened, the Loma Fire being an example of that. The important thing to note on both slides is that, as we all know, the natural disasters, the storms, the flooding, the fires, if there was an earthquake, some sort of plane crash, any sort of big unusual current event, they don't care about jurisdictional lines. And so what Raquel was talking about was the teamwork that we have when we're working on these types of incidents. And if something happened within the city, we would set up an incident command at that situation and activate our city emergency operations center and immediately begin conversations with our county counterparts, and it truly is a team effort. So when we're talking about emergency protective actions, the three main ones that we're talking about, and they all probably sound really familiar to everyone here. The first one, shelter in place. There's a hazard in the area, and it's either a danger or a potential threat to people, to life, property in the area. And what we use this more in law enforcement than some of the other ones, because we'd use this for law enforcement activity where there's a dangerous person in the area and we want people to go inside, lock their doors, keep them. It's not safe to evacuate. This could be used in a fire type situation, not so much in the actual direct area evacuation orders and warning areas, but outside of that, smoke inhalation, exposure, things like that, we would issue a shelter in place just for exposure and things like that. The next one would be the evacuation warning. And again, that's when these teams that Raquel was talking about get together. It's not one person, it's not one entity. It's everybody getting together and deciding there's a potential threat that's coming into the area. And this is where some of the other things that everybody will talk about today that you've done ahead of time, the go bags, the family plans that you have in place. This is when that warning comes in and you would start to discuss utilizing those things and implementing that family plan that you've put in for an evacuation. An important note that we want to give is that you don't have to wait for the warning to turn into an order to leave, especially if you have some things that are going to take more time, people with disabilities, large animals. You don't have to wait. If there's at any point you feel unsafe and you don't have to wait for it to be an order to leave. A personal example for me, I was lucky enough to be in town and on the mesa during the Loma Fire. I got the call to come in and help. My wife, before I'm leaving, says, hey, do you think we should get ready to go? And I'm now, within the city, there's not a lot of things where you think it would be bad. I start coming down Carrillo Hill and I see flames. There's been no warning. There's been no order. I call and say, start that plan now. Start working on what we have planned now. So you don't have to wait for it to turn into an order, is our main point. The warning is where you start working on those plans that you have in place. And then the actual evacuation order, that means that this potential threat is coming. There's an immediate threat to life or property, and everyone should leave the area. When we do evacuate an area, it's closed to the public, and on the law enforcement side, our focus is security of that area once everybody is out. So that's the big concern for a lot of people when they evacuate the area, is what's going to happen to the area. We own that as security. We have patrols. We work on operational plans to assign officers to those areas. Am I forgetting anything?
I think one more thing to add too is that these are not necessarily sequential. You're not going to see a warning and then an order. You may just go straight to an order, and it may go backwards too. You may be in an order area and then it will be updated to an evacuation warning. So these aren't necessarily linear.
All right, so my colleagues have talked to you a little bit about what we consider for emergency protective actions. Now I'm going to talk to you about how we get that really important message out to all of you. So when we're issuing emergency alerts, we always want to ensure that the right information is to the right people at the right time, and I'll just add, so they can take action. Our goal is always to protect lives and property. And when we're issuing emergency alerts, time is of the essence. Whether it is a protective action for a fire or any other type of incident, time is always a factor. When we communicate, we will always tell you what is happening, and we'll tell you the action that you need to take in these emergency alerts. And then we also strive to use multiple alerting and communication pathways. And I'll give you some examples of both those alerting and those communication pathways here in a second. All right, so we've heard mention of evacuation orders and shelter in place. Those are what we call immediate protective actions. So those are always going to be our first priority whenever we're issuing emergency alerts. We're pretty familiar in our area that there may be one section of our community that's under an evacuation order, and perhaps the area just slightly outside of it is in a warning zone. So immediate protective actions are always going to come out first, and then we're going to focus on group number 2 here, readiness for protective action. We want to be sure that our readiness group knows that they have an evacuation warning, and for some, as we shared in the slide before, that might mean that it's time to go, depending on your individual circumstances. For others, it'll mean get ready. You may have an evacuation order, you may not. That will depend on the factors. And then our final priority in alerting is going to be our awareness group, which is where most of our community is actually going to fall. So these are the folks who may see traffic impacts because of a fire. They may be smelling smoke or seeing smoke. So our communication to them is that third tier in alerting. And of course, we want to always ensure that folks are not calling 911 just for information. We have very robust information channels in Santa Barbara County, and so we lean on those to ensure 911 stays open for true emergencies. All right, show of hands. How many of you have heard of Ready SBC alerts? Oh, I love it. That's great. How many of you are registered on Ready SBC alerts? Oh, great. Love to see it. So I'm very happy to see that this is our primary alerting tool in our community. Some main points that I'll go over about Ready SBC alerts that perhaps you can share with a neighbor who isn't registered. It is essential that people go to readysbc.org and actually put in their registration. We cannot grab your phone numbers from other places, your addresses from other places. This is a system in which you have to opt into and register for. It's really amazing because you can, as you all know, since you've registered, you can register up to 5 addresses in Santa Barbara County. What I will say is if you are registered, I encourage a couple of things. Ensure that you have no typos in your address, ensure that your zip code is correct, and ensure that your phone number is inputted correctly. Those are some of the common errors that we see in our system as to why alerts are not reaching you. What I'd also encourage you to do is consider your personal circumstances. Perhaps you've had family move into the area and you want to add their address. Perhaps you're newly retired and there's a new place that you frequent and you want to know if there's things going on where that place is. Add the address if it's in Santa Barbara County. So just think about your personal circumstances and revisit. I encourage you to revisit your registration. In addition to at least one physical address, we do need one contact method. So a phone number, an email address. And we actually, that's the beginning, but you're all registered. We do have a QR code here if you are interested in just having that website pulled up on your phone, easily available to share with anyone who you think might not be registered. So as I mentioned, we have multiple alerting tools. Ready SBC alerts are just one of those tools. Other tools that you might be familiar with, Nixle, which is texting your zip code to this phone number listed here. Nixle provides very limited information. If we're providing an alert to a specific area within a zip code, then that information may not reach you if we're not alerting the entire zip code. So limited information there. Additionally, we have wireless emergency alerting, or WEAs. So these are the messages that pop up on your phone with a very loud sound. I'm sure you're familiar with them. So that's also a tool that's available to us. And then Emergency Alert System, EAS. I'm sure you're familiar with hearing the tests that are run very often on the radio or on TV. This is a test of the Emergency Alert System. So that's what that is, and that's a tool that's also available to us. With these last two tools, I'll mention that it is not only your county or city agencies that have access to them. Agencies such as the National Weather Service may actually send you those types of alerts. So something to look out for. In a wireless emergency alert, it'll always tell you who that message is from, and same is true with most of these other sources. One thing I will add before we move on is that we are always looking to improve the way that we're alerting our communities. We know that not any one of these ways is perfect, and so just know that your public safety officials in this community are looking at different options. We're currently exploring new software that is actually going to allow public safety officials to come together more quickly, make decisions about evacuations, and push out a map even faster than we already do. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be sure to push out lots of public information once that becomes available. All right, and so I mentioned we have alerting channels and communication channels. What I just reviewed with you were our alerting channels. These are our communication channels. This is where you're gonna find incident information and lots of updates. So we lean on traditional media. They are always informed of what we're doing. So that includes local TV stations, newspapers, online journals. For the county, we also lean on our cable station, which is Channel 20 for updates. Call centers. Have any of you used our county call center during an emergency ever? Show of hands, couple. So that is a resource that is available almost with every protective action that we issue. You're gonna have the county call center that's open if the county is involved in the incident, and that's a great resource. Our call center operators are seasoned and really invested in our community. And of course, that's to reserve the use of 911 for emergency matters only. ReadySBC.org, a great source of information for incidents. We'll have a banner at the top of the web page that links you directly to incident information. We provide that information in English and Spanish. That is a commitment that our partners are really invested in. And then social media, so Twitter and X. This list is not exhaustive. It's just representing our agencies and some of our partnering agencies at the city and county, but great places for information about an incident. What I will say is that Public safety officials tend to lean on Twitter and X for those play-by-play kind of updates that are happening. And then Facebook and Instagram and Nextdoor have longer updates with perhaps more details. So that's kind of the difference with some of those platforms. All right, and I'll hand this over.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how evacuations work. So there's several different ways that you may learn that you're in an evacuation area. We do door-to-door notifications. That's going to be done either by a law enforcement agency, and then at the sheriff's office, we do use our volunteer search and rescue team. They are highly effective in getting out there and getting that information to areas very quickly. Additionally, you may hear a high-low siren. Has anyone here heard the high-low siren or familiar with the high-low siren, also called a Euro siren? Okay, so I think Jackie's going to play that for you, so I don't have to voice it. What's that? So while she gets that paused, so that is the high-low siren that you'll hear from Santa Barbara PD. I think we have a second that is just slightly different, but you'll notice that it's a high tone and a low tone that alternates, generally speaking, which is a little different than the rolling sound. That is the sound clip from the sheriff's office, which, like I said, is slightly different, but same idea, high-low, right? So that's a secondary form of notification for evacuations. That one makes it so that we can drive through a neighborhood and get information out fairly quickly. That sound means it's time to go. And then additionally, we do use our county air support unit, which is a joint unit between the sheriff's office and county fire to do flyovers over encampments to reach our unhoused populations so that we can also get them with a swath of notifications. Was that it for that slide? Yeah. All right.
All right. So we've reached the end of our just about 20 minutes, and we have just a couple of takeaways. If you don't have them already, we wanted to just give you some to take home here at the end. Number one, make a plan ahead of time. This is going to be crucial to ensuring that you are ready to go when and if the moment comes. You might have seen the Ready, Set, Go booklets. They're available in English and Spanish through county fire, through city fire agencies. You may have received them in the mail too. So this is a really great place to start to make your plan. I encourage you to do something that my family has done. We've actually talked through some of this plan over a dinner. Just have the conversation out loud, get those ideas moving as to what you would do. And if this is something that you've done previously already, check that box. I encourage you to do it yearly because, again, your personal circumstances might have changed. There might be new people in your circle. People might have moved to different areas of the community. So always really great to revisit this. Know your neighbors. This is something I highly recommend for a number of reasons. Your neighbors, especially if you're perhaps newer to a neighborhood, are great historians. They know of any natural disasters that have impacted your neighborhood. They know of any changes that have happened over the last few decades. They know how wildfires or even smoke impacts have potentially impacted your area. So really great to go out and chat with your neighbors. Additionally, it helps public safety officials to know that, if you have knowledge that your neighbor has some special needs, has lots of children perhaps, has an elderly family member. All of this information can help public safety officials respond in an appropriate manner. And then last one, if you feel unsafe, take action. Commander Miller shared a great personal experience of that. There may be times in which our alerting doesn't make it to you in the right time, and it's going to be, a personal choice to take action and to leave the area. Believe what you're seeing and take action. And I think that's all we have for you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys. Next up is Professor Alan Murray, talking about the geography of evacuation. See if I can get out of this.
We're good? Good morning. This is the low point of the presentation, so sorry. You're stuck with a UCSB professor. I'm a professor of geography. I've been here 9 years, so I'm a lot less than others, but I was here back in the day going to school. That's another story. In addition to being a professor of geography, lead something called the Wildfire Resilience Initiative that involves a number of other faculty in the room, Layla, Charles, Dar, Stuart, I don't know, maybe Max is here. The focus of this is looking at all aspects of wildfire resiliency, within that, partly evacuation, but also monitoring of vegetation, weather, different kinds of vegetation and its behavior. Sorry, how's that? I'll be better. The point is that as a part of this initiative, we're looking at not only the risks and dangers associated with wildfire, but also potential mitigation efforts that can happen before as well as post-fire activity. So with that, I was kind of hoping that Brian would stay up here. It's a bit more comforting, right, with the guy with the gun. I think I need this on campus also, get students' attention. So I'm going to give a bigger picture view of this, and so some of this repeats what we heard already. But part of this is just to show the complexity of evacuation and what's involved, and that we need to understand all of these elements to realize really some of the important things we need to do. And of course, since I'm from UCSB, I'm going to start off with a definition, and we'll have a quiz later about what this is. But it's the idea that we need to move or vacate people and or property from a dangerous or uninhabitable area. And there's lots of triggers, as was mentioned by Brian previously. Today we're focusing a bit on wildfire, and this is a view of the evacuation Malibu, Woolsey in 2018. Very ominous. This thing went viral for good reason, but you can see sort of the complexities of evacuation here, and we'll come back to this. But implied in all of this is that there's safe and unsafe areas. And of course, this depends on the hazard. Geography. Why am I up here? Why are we talking about this? So it turns out there's many important components of this, and all of it is inherently spatial, geographic. So there has to be an ignition. It depends on the fuels and the vegetation, the weather conditions, winds, the terrain. It depends on our fire response, what they're able to do and protect, like in the case of the Thomas Fire, where Ojai is clearly protected by various means of human intervention, the behavior of fire, but also the people and the safety options that are in place. Evacuation factors. So you'll see I put, why do we need to evacuate? Where are we going to evacuate? Who do we need to evacuate? When do we need to do this? How? I did realize that I didn't have what here. I could have put what, all of those that we learned in elementary school. But we have many zones in our region, and the incidents could trigger these. Interestingly, you may have seen these we have these evacuation zones. I think Montecito is the only one that really show you those evacuation zones for what it may mean. The rest of the areas in our region keep it a secret, I think. But I've got the secret. Just send me a note. I'll share it with you right after you do the quiz about what evacuation is. So the key elements of evacuation. We need to evacuate, and I'm going to go through some of these a little bit and give some details, but The timing of the event, the demographics of our region are really important. Turns out we do weird things. Our behavior's quite important in terms of evacuation, our needs to evacuate, and then the configuration of our transportation-oriented system. So event timing, things that are critically important. Do we have enough time to evacuate? Some of this was mentioned previously by Brian. What are the factors in this evacuation? And what's going to trigger? Well, it's complicated. It could depend on the terrain, where the incident started, the behavior that we expect of the fire, the weather and wind conditions, and the associated fuels. And then, that's odd. In terms of this timing event, there's all of these components that go into evacuation in terms of when we hear about it, the time we need to make some decision, and of course, at the bottom here is this clearing time. And I think that the real point here is that there's some amount of time it takes for us to engage in this evacuation process. And at some point, we get to a situation where it's dire, where we don't have enough time to engage in these elements of evacuation. So, as we'll get to at the end, and as was mentioned already, this preparation, planning, understanding this issue of evacuation is super important. The demographic, so what you see here in the graphic, I'm not going to quiz you on this, but it's showing what we consider social vulnerability areas or degrees of social vulnerability in the region, combined with our unhoused population and where they exist in terms of this. Again, some of this may resonate if you understand Santa Barbara, but issues to consider in the demographic side: how many people, depending upon the incident, will we need to evacuate? Where do we how do we get them from where they are to where they need to be? Is this a daytime or a nighttime population? Those dynamics can differ quite a bit. Are there workers of various sorts present? Do people need assistance? Are there vulnerable groups that need special attention? Those kinds of things. So the third element of evacuation that I want to talk about, human behavior. Will people leave when given notice? What you see in this graphic over here is over time. We did a study at UCSB looking at when people evacuated, and you can see it's a cumulative percentage. So some people did begin in advance, but the point of this graphic is that even at the end, some 10% of people didn't evacuate at all. So that does happen. How will they travel? Is this one car? Is it all the vehicles? Is it everything they own, and scooters and bikes or whatever? Complicates things. Will some people be trying to return home to get things, to get people, to get pets? Which route will people take? And it turns out people do super odd things under these stressful situations. Super unusual things. Will aggressive driving under stressful conditions cause an accident? Will it reduce our capacity to evacuate an area, limit flow options? And then, just as a contrast, people do behave a little differently, whether it's a mandatory evacuation versus just a warning. Transport needs. So I think this is a picture from Colorado showing that under these conditions, visibility could be pretty poor. So this would affect our ability to evacuate, to engage in transportation. But what mode will people take? Walking, biking, not likely, but typically we see a vehicle, may need some transit assistance. Will there be unique needs, as Brian mentioned, horses, other sort of unusual events? And then, as I mentioned, visibility, and that it can really be a function or issue. Okay. Network configuration. So a lot of our work at UCSB on the evacuation side has been looking at street configurations, and really the ability to get people out. And so what you see in this figure up in the top right, the red means it's bad. That means there's a lot of people, and there's basically some kind of network bottleneck to get people out that will inhibit flow, exit flow. So in terms of the configuration, it really can affect our ability to evacuate, including limiting our evacuation route options. It can affect the capacities of these outlets and the routes. Do our intersections enable people to get out easily? Will there be assistance at like stop signs and street lights to help the flow keep moving or not? And within all this, as we're trying to get people out, can people go against the flow and go back to get things or get people? And finally, in terms of the configuration of our system, is the parking situation doing something to affect our ability to get people out on routes? And there's, as many know, many areas of Santa Barbara where that actually impacts in a negative way our ability to move people. So in terms of our research, this graphic in the background is actually from a simulation, because we do a lot of work looking at simulating behavior of people under stressful conditions. And interestingly, these simulations show really the kinds of behavior we see, people doing very odd things in terms of their driving and behavior, and it's kind of humorous to watch. But in terms of our research, we're looking at not only where the issues are in terms of evacuation potential in our region, but also the general risks of wildfire and vulnerability in our area. And we know, and to reiterate some of the points that were raised already, in terms of evacuation, human behavior is complicated, especially under stressful conditions. Our ability to evacuate areas is actually quite different across the region. It's not homogeneous, it's not the same, it's very heterogeneous. Some are more risky than others. The importance of advanced plans, route guidance, having some idea of what you might do under certain conditions is super important. Somewhat understudied, and that's some of our focus at UCSB, is that infrastructure may fail. We may lose a road. We may have a command center or something that takes over a street, and that could limit some of our options. And we really don't understand a lot of the impacts of this in terms of evacuation. So it's really an understudied sort of need, things that we're continuing to look at UCSB. And further, we know quite a bit about where people are and sort of their vulnerability type issues, but not very detailed. And so we're continuing to do a lot of work in that area. So with that, I'm done. Thank you. Right on time.
Perfect, thank you. We're going to take a quick, well, we do have 10 minutes on the agenda, but we're going to do an 8-minute break, and at 5 minutes, we'll start ushering people back in. We are a little behind schedule, so if you guys want to stretch your legs, go to the bathroom. Bathroom is out that door, all the way down the hall to the left. If you have questions for Raquel or Jackie or Brian or Alan, they will be down here, and you can bug them. Hi, everyone. Sorry to interrupt the conversation. Make sure we get to the next talk. It is my favorite one of the day. Sit down. We're going to get started with the next talk coming up. We're going to take their seats. And have conversations during lunch. All right, getting there. And again, if people could squeeze in towards the center so people who were sitting on the sides earlier can have a seat, that'd be fantastic. Cool. All right, for our next talk, this is something we've been working on for the past couple weeks, months, last night. Wildfire evacuation survival skills, recognizing that sometimes notices don't come fast enough, fire happens super fast, you decide to stay when you shouldn't. Wanted to talk about how to survive evacuation. So we're working on this with Nick Elmquist from Montecito Fire, Wildland Fire Specialist, and Rob Hazard, our recently retired County Fire Marshal.
All right. Good to see so many familiar faces in the crowd. Great venue. For some reason, they gave Rob and I a full hour, and they gave everybody else about 15 or 20 minutes. So they must know we'll put some cool pictures that get people's attention. But I figured I had a few minutes. I just wanted to plug the Santa Barbara County Fire Safe Council. Yeah, thank you. The organization kind of stemmed out of a fire that we'll talk about in 1990. The Painted Cave Fire, as a lot of you may be familiar with, burned up about 420 homes, killed a person. The next year, 1991, was the Oakland Hills Fire. Killed 25 people. It started off as a tunnel fire. If you guys are familiar with the East Bay, Moraga, Orinda, ended up burning about 2,500 structures. And it got a lot of people's attention across the state about ways that maybe we could start improving ways of doing business. And one way they saw avenues for improvement was combining some of the knowledge that the civilians and residents had, because oftentimes the civilians and residents know their neighborhoods the best, and finding avenues to connect them with agency people like us. And that's what kind of stemmed the Fire Safe Councils. What started, the Santa Barbara County Fire Safe Council started in 1996. Ted Adams, sitting here in the front row, was part of that group that initially started it. The chief of Montecito at the time, Herb McElwee, was very influential. And it's been a volunteer organization for several decades. And just the stars aligned a few years ago. Max Moritz wrote a grant. We were able to hire an executive director, Anna Marie, who's been hosting it. And under her leadership, we've been able to hire about 4 or 5 additional staff. All are great. The people in green shirts are either our staff or on the board. We have a board of 13 people. We meet every 4th Thursday. After COVID, we turned it virtual. And every other monthly meeting is more of a general, everybody's always welcome, but oftentimes it's board business every other meeting. But the ones that are general membership, we try to get guest presentations. And a lot of us have a lot of relationships, and since it's virtual, we get people from all across the country to have anything to do about wildfire, fire ecology, evacuations, weather, things that are pretty cool. We're able to video it. So I just encourage you to go to the Santa Barbara County Fire Safe Council website. There's a lot of good information. We have an in-person meeting next Thursday at Direct Relief. Another professor from UCSB that's very familiar, been doing research about insurance. Obviously, people are interested in that. He's going to be presenting on that research. So just wanted to give a little bit of note to that. Okay, so like I said, I'm Nick Elmquist. I work for Montecito Fire Department. This is going to be my 25th fire season. The first 19 were with the U.S. Forest Service. Been involved with quite a few evacuations through the years. Last year, I'm on an incident management team. We were actually on the Smith River fire up east of Crescent City, evacuated the town of Gasky for about a week or 10 days. During those evacuations, there's a lot of meetings that are held, community meetings similar to this. and we're explaining to people, why they're evacuated, trying to give them updates. And it's a lot easier to give a good presentation when you're actually really familiar with the area, which I am more familiar with Santa Barbara than I am of the Smith River drainage. So there's a few things I've learned through the years. One, evacuations are never perfect. Afterwards, you could always look back, and there's always a host of things that you could do better. And so I think that's something that everybody needs to remember, is that it's a very dynamic situation. Fires are very dynamic. There's a fog of war that occurs, and so there's going to be things that go wrong. Also, because of the dynamic nature of fires, it's going to be fairly messy, but the agencies are going to be overwhelmed. There's only so many fire engines, even with the mutual aid response. The Thomas fire was a little bit different once it started getting into Santa Barbara County, because there's weeks and weeks we had tons of fire engines, but oftentimes some of the fires we're going to be talking about, when you're having to evacuate now, fire agencies are going to be overwhelmed. So we're not going to be able to, agencies aren't going to be able to help every individual person. So I think the intent of Rob and I's presentation is not to give you hard and fast rules of what to do, what not to do, but to give you information, because you're going to have to make decisions on your own. And so hopefully after our presentation, you'll have some more information and you can make better decisions. So that's the intent of our presentation. All right, so anybody that's been around and knows about fire knows that there's three main factors that drive fire behavior. It's the topography, right? The weather, and the fuel. And they aren't independent. They all kind of, in fact, influence each other. But we're going to go through each one and talk about why the Santa Barbara region has some of the most complex fires across the world, really. This is taken just east of Divide Peak, looking west along the San Ynez mountain range. I'm not going to get into the geography because I could count at least 3 UCSB geography professors here, and I don't want to embarrass myself. But this is called a transverse range, right, Alan? Yep, and it's transverse because it's crosswise, right? Most of our main mountain ranges run north-south, the Sierra Nevadas, the Rocky Mountains, for instance. But this is transverse. Our coast is south. There's only about a mile and a half from the coastal range, which is oftentimes much cooler, to the top of the San Ynez, and then there's a dramatic shift down to the San Ynez Valley with the temperature gradient, pressure differentials, and that causes some pretty unique weather patterns that drive and make our fires extremely complex, especially on the front country. This is just a short video to show just the really extreme topographic conditions that we face on the front country of Santa Barbara. So this was taken from some folks out of UC San Diego Scripps Institute that were doing LIDAR surveys of the front country. I believe this is the drainage just east of Painted Cave. That's East Camino Cielo off the top where they launch from. So this is sort of country you don't go in and put a fire out, right? We have trail systems. The Jesucita fire started off the trail, but once you get a fire that's established in these mountainous regions, there's very little that you could do, especially under extreme fire conditions. So in terms of fire agencies, that's why when you get fires in these areas, and we'll talk about some of the weather patterns that drive them down into town, really, we're going to be talking about evacuation, and that's what the intent of this meeting is. A bird's eye view. Well over 100% slope in most of those areas. You can see broken country, very rocky in a lot of areas. Chaparral is a vegetation type that we refer to collectively. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about fuels. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the weather. All of us know and love Santa Barbara County because our Mediterranean climate, right? One of the characteristics of a Mediterranean climate is our rain season is compressed within a few separate months. So this is a graph showing the water year starts in September. Very little rain, 1% really of our total rainfall of the year happens in September, and it slowly starts to increase. Really, the bulk of our rain happens in December through March, a little bit in April, and then it pretty much shuts off right around now. And that happens almost every year, where it's just almost like flipping on a switch. Our rain's gonna turn off, and things are gonna start to dry out. This is last winter's rainfall across the state. You'll see the color hues, yellow and green are about 100%. The majority of the state saw above normal rainfall. We're one of the lucky ones down here, 2 good rainfall years, we needed it, about 150% in Santa Barbara County. This is from the Santa Barbara County hydrology. Overall, about 140% of what was considered normal. But I also just wanted to point out how drastically different the annual rainfall is across different regions. So 57 inches up at San Marcos Pass, which was about 160% of normal. All right, we see some residents from the Trout Club probably in Painted Cave. But Cuyama, even though they saw 120% of normal, they only got 9¼ inches. So depending on where you are throughout the county really influences the rain. But the message is, you know, these last couple years have really been good in terms of increasing the groundwater in our reservoirs, obviously. So how much rain we get in the winter impacts our fuel conditions. All vegetation across the landscape that could burn can be broken up into 2 different categories: dead fuels and live fuels. Pretty simple. The dead fuels, we have these 4 kind of subcategories based on size. Raise your hand if you started a campfire. Almost everybody. If you haven't, you need to do it. Designated campsite, you know, fire ring. Don't do it off some random trail. But as you know, when you start a fire, you start with kindling, right? You start with maybe gathering some pine needles and grasses, because those have the larger surface area to volume. They dry out a lot quicker, and that's what kind of gets the heat going. But they go out really quick. So you get some grasses, and you put some twigs on top. Those are the 10-hour fuels. Once you get a little bit of that established, then you get a little bit of the larger branches. And once you finally get a good heat base, you put on the oak logs. But you don't just go and put an oak log and try to burn it. So that's kind of the thought process when you're thinking about how fire burns. It's going to initially burn the lighter fuels. That's why a lot of our ignitions start along roadways and trails, disturbed sites where we get our annual grasses, because those are the driest, the most easily to ignite. A lot of times when we have years like this year, you'll hear a lot of the old timers say that's when you sometimes get some of your larger fires, because you have that grass fuel bed that really drives it up into our brush. The second picture is of chamise, right, Carla? Chamise? All right. And so this is going to determine, no matter how much heat you get going in that campfire, even when the oak logs are burning, it's very hard to cut a live bush and try to get that to burn. So it's the same kind of similar concept, right? That's why the time since last fire, what we call fire return interval, plays a big part in the intensity of the fires. The Thomas fire scar that's 6 years ago now, it's going to take a little bit for it to get enough of the dead fuels on the left to really be acceptable to burn. But when we start talking about concepts of evacuations, and if you have to seek refuge in areas, thinking about the fuel conditions of the areas where you're along your roadways that you're going to be evacuating, or within your community, just thinking about these concepts where there's lighter fuels, maybe they've been weed whipped. These are areas that are probably not going to see too much of an intense fire if you were to have to shelter in those areas. Okay, let's just talk briefly about the live fuels. This is from Santa Barbara County. They do live fuel sampling. They cut the chamise, which I just showed that last picture. They'll weigh it, and then they'll dry it out and weigh it again, and it gives you a percentage of how much moisture is held in that plant. And what I want to point out is that, 60% is what we consider critical. Almost always, we peak out around April or May, right around now. And this is regardless of how much rain we have. It may shift a little bit earlier or a little bit later, but you're always, because of the Mediterranean climate like we talked about, and the rain turns off, all those plants are going to dry out, even if we got 200% of rain in the winter. But come fall conditions, August, September, October, November if we don't see rain, or December like the 2017, those fuels are going to continue to dry. The live fuels are going to be critically dry come to the fall, regardless of what the rain was that last winter. So you can think about how that relates to fire danger. There's 2 main indices that we talk about when we're talking about fire danger. The BIs, which is burning index, and the ERCs, the energy release component, which is essentially just saying how much energy potential is at the head of that fire. So this is taken from the blue line is this current year. The gray is average. So because of the amount of rain we've had, we're well below average. This little green tail, it predicts for the next 7 days. So it's just showing that we're still, kind of in this even trend. But really, we don't start getting into our peaks until September, this gray line. That's when fire danger is going to be at the highest throughout the South Coast, us and Ventura, essentially. But the red line shows the maximum days over this climatological period since 2009 to 2022. That's what these graphs are based on. And what I just want to point out is there's always these days that happen in the fall where we get extreme conditions. So really, we need to be paying attention, right? From now, fire danger is going to start to increase, but really when we need to be heads up is when we get out of these, the marine layer pushes off, we're in September, October, and it's incredibly dry. Our fuels conditions are the driest, and we'll get these, 2 or 3 day events where our fire danger are going to be about as high as they get throughout the year. And that's really when we need to pay attention. This is from another geography lab, Charles Jones at the Earth Research Institute at UCSB. They did 30 years of climatological data and just looking at the sundowner winds. As you guys all know, the sundowners are pretty unique. There are different areas of downsloping winds across the planet, really, but it's a fairly unique situation, and we get it here in Santa Barbara. And they broke it down into, sundowners that affect the west transverse. So Gaviota, I live up north in North County, and I know come spring or fall, there's many times when you're driving through Gaviota and you get hit like a freight train right when you turn past the rest stop, right? When you drive that area, it blows a lot more frequently, stronger winds on the west side. But there are these events that happen throughout the year, but it's kind of bimodal, where you get strong events in the spring and then strong events in the fall. So hopefully you're starting to see how the fire danger, dry fuels, 5, 6, 7 months since last rainfall, and now we're getting sundowner winds on top of that. Why fires can get so extreme here in Santa Barbara County, and you need to be really heads up, especially in the fall time. This is just looking at some notable fires in the county, going all the way back to 1964. The Coyote Fire burned 106 structures, had a fatality. But I just wanted to point out, the Jesucita was an early season fire, May, but everything else is more or less June, and some of the most catastrophic and damaging were later in the year under those fall conditions. So just shifting gears a little bit and talking about how a fire burns. So all the fires have an ignition point, right? And if there's a wind, if there's no slope, it's going to follow the wind. Or if there's slope, it's probably oftentimes going to go uphill if there's no wind. Where it starts is always going to be referred to as the heel, and that's how you reference it. There's going to be a right flank going up the right side, the left flank going up the left, and the fire is going to be most intense at the head. So the flanks are going to be a lot cooler. That's why oftentimes suppression tactics, we get an anchor point, you anchor off the heel, and you could actually hopefully try to go direct, either with hand crews, helicopter, air tankers, and you're trying to go around those flanks and pinch the fire at the head. So you're slowly starting to squeeze the heat out of the fire. Just reference these spot fires out ahead of it. It's oftentimes going to be out ahead of the main fire because that's where it's the most intense. And you'll see it oftentimes burning in the lighter fuels. Like the Thomas fire came all the way from Ventura County, hit the T fire scar in 2008, so it didn't have as much dead fuel to really get it going. But you would see if you look at a map of the little spots that it burned, a lot of where the annual grasses and the light fuels were, it wasn't intense enough to burn the brush, but it was burning the grasses that were dried out because it was December. We call the chimney effect, so paying attention to topography, right? Fire is going to want to burn up the hill, and the way that it's the chimney, it kind of condenses the air, dries out the fuels, heats it up out ahead of itself, and speeds it up. Generally, slope, for every 10% increase in slope, we see about a four times greater rate of growth rate of spread of fires. So a significant influence that slope has on fire spread. So just thinking about the concepts when you're having to evacuate, especially a lot of our mountain areas. This is Tucker's Grove, looking up the 154. Look at all those confluences of drainages, how the 154 switches back, how many different variables, right? Depending on where the fire is coming from, where you are in relation to the fire. And this is the paint fire. So what's very unique under these sundowner conditions, and what makes it even more complex, is fires will burn down the hill. So the X is where it started up near the 154, and it burned all the way across the 101 down here towards Hope Ranch, because when you have winds that strong and that dry, it actually overpowers the slope, and that's what drives the fire. So just understanding the factors that influence fire spread and making those decisions when there's a fire, trying to figure out, where you are in relation to the fire, where's the wind, where's the topography, so that you could go the opposite direction. It also just points out, this is on East Mountain Drive, one of our residents, the importance of fuels management along our roadways. So thinking about all the concepts we've been talking about, because not only are we going to be evacuating people out, but we're going to be trying to get first responders in, right, to anchor in and do all these suppression taxes we're talking about, protect the structures. So you could think about, even in extreme conditions, a really strong downsloping wind like the Thomas fire, it's going to be intense as it's up here in the vegetation, but there's going to start decreasing intensity once it starts getting out of that thick fuels. This has been type converted to grass, weed whipped, and so there's going to be a lot less intensity for people that are trying to evacuate along our roadways. And then you're able to bring equipment in, there's turnouts, there's a fire hydrant, and start to think about your suppression operations. Okay, so I just want to talk briefly about the tools that you have to understand the fire danger for the given day that you're in. I kind of gave you a good background, hopefully, that you're thinking about the seasonality of fire danger here in Santa Barbara. But you could go to any of our jurisdictional web pages, Santa Barbara City Fire, Montecito, Carpinteria. This is from Santa Barbara County. You'll see today's fire danger, low. This was just the other day. You'll also see around town a lot of fire stations will have signs with arrows, and that is just a representation, a physical representation of the fire danger that you see on the websites. So starting to pay attention. What's the fire danger today? Is it low? Is it moderate? Is it high? You need to start paying more attention. Is it very high or extreme? Maybe you need to fill up the gas. Start paying particular attention of the conditions. The Weather Service, the National Weather Service, is a great resource throughout the country. Go to their webpage, become familiar with it. A lot of people in our area are hikers and boaters and surfers. A lot of us are weather nerds. All fire people are weather nerds. But this is a great place, especially as you get into the fall, just to start paying attention to the weather conditions and understanding the environment so you could help yourselves. We've been very fortunate because of funding, Santa Barbara County Fire, and the Fire Safe Council and a lot of the other jurisdictions have been really proactive in building these community wildfire protection plans. This is for the Santa Barbara Fire Safe Council website. Most likely every single one of you reside in an area that is covered by a community wildfire protection plan. It will be very thorough to explain the specific hazards of your neighborhoods and give reasons or mitigation actions and give you specific information. So I recommend going to the Fire Safe Council. You'll see it. It'll be community wildfire protection plans. Find your area, read your plan. They're usually pretty thick documents, but there's a good table of contents. You could pick out what pertains to you. Okay, this is just a time wedge. Oftentimes we use it operationally to try to get people to be decisive and to understand the earlier you make a decision, right, the more time you have, the more options that you have. So you have more of a margin of error. We talked about how it's such a dynamic situation. You can't predict what's going to happen. The more time you have, the more options. If you wait too long, You're going to have very limited options, and that's when accidents happen. There's a lot of people, we have this conversation about sheltering or staying and defending, to each their own. But I've seen a lot of fire professionals, right? We go to these large fires, and you'll get city engines that come out, and the fire's a week away, and they feel super comfortable where they are. And you'll see those same people, in sticky situations a week later when the fire is actually on them because they don't have those slides. So that's just a little bit of information to think about. Is it's all fine and dandy under blue skies, but these conditions can change. You get a sundowner wind, and it's very, very extreme. So Rob will get more into the details about the evacuation specific and fire behavior under these conditions. But I just wanted to kind of segue into Rob's talk, hopefully. All right, so this is in 2008, the T fire just above Westmont. Just to give you a slide of the conditions that we see when all these extreme conditions align and you get a wildfire that then starts getting into an urban conflagration. This is not an area where you want to be conducting rescues, right? It's an area that you want to hopefully have everybody already evacuated, and you're doing point protection and trying to save what you can and waiting for the conditions to change. So I'm going to bring up Rob to talk more about the evacuation-specific information. Thanks.
All right. So that previous little video clip is pretty intense and probably represents the most extreme situation that you'd be faced with, but we've actually seen that quite a bit on the Santa Barbara South Coast. So a little bit about myself, Rob Hazard. I just retired from 36 years in the fire service. Thank you. The last 26 was with Santa Barbara County Fire, and before that I worked with the Forest Service on our local hotshot crew for 10 years. And actually, in my third year on the hotshot crew was the Painted Cave Fire. So that was my introduction to this type of urban interface fire that requires huge evacuations. And I'll readily admit, when Anne Marie hit me up to be part of this presentation, it wasn't like my favorite subject to talk about evacuation. For 36 years, I'm always running to the fire. That's my natural inclination. I actually feel sort of a sense of familiarity with fire and kind of almost that strange sort of adrenaline thing that wildland firefighters have. So I feel very comfortable with wildland fire, not that I haven't had nervous moments, but yeah, it was always a running to the fire. Not to mention, I also grew up out on the Gaviota coast on a rural piece of property a long ways from any fire stations. And my family, my father in particular, would always tell me as a young kid, we're not going to evacuate. And he'd take me out in the yard and go, here's this fire hose and turn this sprinkler on and run around and wet all this down. And so as a kid, I had this whole drill in my head. So my family's version of ready, set, go was actually ready, set, stay, fight the fire. So it was that in my head was a factor for many, many, many years. And, you know, this kind of follows what happened sort of broadly across a lot of different jurisdictions and countries that were dealing with wildland fire evacuation and what the best policy would look like. And so this idea that you would actually have the option to stay and sort of act as a militia fighting fires on your property goes back to Australia. And they actually had a program that was prepare, stay, defend, or leave early. And interestingly, we had some jurisdictions in Southern California that were looking at adopting this policy. But unfortunately, 2009 Black Saturday bushfires, they had 173 fatalities. And many of those fatalities were people that decided to stay and defend. And so the jurisdictions that had been looking at that as an idea quickly dropped it. All the material got thrown in the round file. And California in general, and across most of the United States, the Ready, Set, Go program became the adopted policy and stance of fire agencies. And how many people are familiar with Ready, Set, Go? Pretty much everybody. Good. So Ready, Set, Go generally emphasizes the need for leaving early. That's the whole concept of Ready, Set, Go. And there's a huge amount of effort that's put into the ready component of it and the set component of it. That's really the vast focus right now from the fire agencies, is being prepared before the event, because we know that there's so many challenges once the event happens. So the key thing with Ready, Set, Go is knowing when to leave. And what you've heard already this morning, there are so many variables in that equation. And then obviously knowing where to go. And again, being familiar with your local community and having these types of evacuation plans with your community are so important. And then how to get there to prevent being caught in smoke, fire, and road congestion. And so you saw from that little video clip, you can imagine if you were stuck on that roadway when all that smoke and embers are flying across, and what type of visibility issues that you'd have. But what we see in the reality, so it's one thing to have the Ready, Set, Go pamphlet and do the training and attend lectures where people talk about it and have firefighters explain it to you incessantly. But what we find out in reality is there's actually two types of go that we're experiencing broadly across the Western United States on these wildfire events. And so there's the leave early go, all right? This is where you have a lot of time. The fire is nowhere near your community, and you've gotten proper notification very early on, and you actually have time to think about it. And you can actually even debate with your family, like, should we not? No, I think we have a lot of time. But hey, let's start thinking about all those things that we've talked about. And I'll give you a very prescient example of this leave early go where you have all of this time. And that would be the experience of the Thomas Fire in Santa Barbara County. And it's super important that Santa Barbara County qualification there, that's the key to this, because the other go, which is the no notice, immediate, like literally woken up in the middle of the night, it's time to go, there's fire, it's gonna hit your neighborhood in 10 minutes. So this is the experience that Ventura County had on that very same fire. So when the Thomas Fire started, it was under Santa Ana wind conditions, extremely fast rate of spread, and literally burned into several Ventura County communities, including the city of Ventura, and was burning thousands of homes within the first 30 minutes to an hour of the fire. Barely enough time for all of those notification systems to get put into place and for people to get enough time to evacuate the way that they'd probably imagined they would in their heads. And so it was a very rapid evacuation, literally grabbing just the clothes on your back and getting into your vehicle or running out on the street and getting away from heat, smoke, and flame. So just a quick reminder of Ready, Set, Go. So the most important concept with Ready, Set, Go is the ready. So this is all of the things that everybody should be doing to their homes to harden them so that they're more resistant to ignition. And all of the defensible space stuff that you do to your yards and your properties to reduce the intensity of fire as it gets into the area immediately surrounding your home. It makes your house more survivable if you're stuck there, and it also creates a much safer environment for firefighters if they're going to defend your structure. So the ready part is something that we all know as Santa Barbarans, that this is something, if you live up in the foothills or in remote areas, and you have that space around you with wildland vegetation, this is something you're doing every spring. People are doing it right now. Weed whacking the dry grass, raking all the oak leaves, cleaning out the gutters, blowing the leaves off the roof. This is all of that preparation you do in the spring. It takes days and days and days, but it pays off in spades. The second part of Ready, Set, Go is the set. And so kind of some of the things we're talking about today go into the set. This is having that evacuation plan with your family, discussing with your family what you're gonna do, where are you gonna go, what are you gonna grab, putting together your go bag, doing really important things like having all of your important documents scanned and put somewhere out in the cloud. So we're really lucky right now in this era that we live in, because all your photos and all of your important papers can actually be saved somewhere remotely in the cloud. Back in the old days, if your house burned down, it probably meant you lost every single picture and you lost all of your documents. And so that's a huge advantage we have. The set is a vital component to Ready, Set, Go, because it is what is ensuring that you are able to evacuate as efficiently as possible. So if you're in the Ventura County Thomas Fire scenario where you only have 10 minutes, hopefully, if you've done the set properly, you know where your go bag is, you know what you're gonna grab, your family knows what to do. Maybe you've got kids that are in school or somebody's at work, but you've all talked about the rally point and where you're gonna go and what the process will be. And then of course the last is the go, and this is super important things like, are you signed up for the alerts? Are you paying attention to the weather conditions for that day and what the various circumstances are with this fire? Are you cognizant of where the fire is in relation to your community? Do you know the road system in your community? So the go is highly dependent that you've done your homework in the ready and the set. So let's say you have 10 minutes to leave. So let's say you're living in Ventura when the Thomas fire started. Or another example that's closer to home, you're living in Montecito when the T fire started. Or you're living in Mission Canyon when the Montecito fire started. So 10 minutes to leave. So this is the idea of the go bag, having that critical amount of emergency gear in your go bag that's gonna get you through the next 24, 36, 48 hours as you've left your house and you're off in a hotel or in a shelter area somewhere. The photos on the wall. In your mind, this is kind of something I do, I know where I have an empty duffel bag. It's in a closet, it's empty, it's a big duffel bag. And so my concept is gonna be somebody in my family is gonna grab that duffel bag and they're gonna walk down all the walls and take all the pictures off the walls and throw them in that duffel bag. Probably break some frames, but the photos will be good. Because some of those photos, I don't have them digitized and they're old family photos and they're really important. Important documents, know where they are. I'm guilty of this. I've got some stuff in one nightstand drawer. I've got some other documents in a dresser drawer. I've got some stuff in a closet. And I was just thinking as I was gearing up for this lecture, I probably should have all of those in like one spot so I would know where to go. One of our folks here on the council brought up the dirty laundry hamper. I was like, what? Why would you want that? Well, it kind of made sense because I'll give you an example. My 17-year-old, his dirty laundry hamper is always full because he's 17. But all of the clothes that are in it are the clothes he wears all the time. In fact, he goes in and grabs clothes out of it and puts them on. So if you have your dirty laundry hamper, that's probably the clothes that are important to grab. And the stuff that's in the closet that like has dust on it because you never wear it, it's probably okay if it burns up. Pets, super important. Remember your pets. Cats, dogs, birds, you name it. These are important members of your family, so don't forget your pets. All right, and then don't leave doors, windows, garage doors open if you can't find your cat or your dog, hoping that maybe they'll come in through the garage door. You just opened up a pathway for embers, and you're probably going to come back to a burn-up home. So the pets usually will figure out what to do. If you can't find them, and if they've bailed off, they're pretty fleet of foot and they'll probably figure out what to do. They have an instinct to go away from fire. So they actually kind of understand that whole set and go part of Ready, Set, Go. And so again, it's super important that when you leave your house, you close the windows and doors. Absolutely close everything up in your home before you leave. All right, and let's talk a little bit about pace planning. So this is something firefighters do constantly. This is how we plan our tactics on fires. This is a concept that is from the military, and wildland firefighters we're great at grabbing little snippets from various organizations, mostly the military, because they really apply well to the type of environment that we work in. But this can apply really well to evacuation planning. So primary is, you get the notice from Ready SBC Alert. You have an hour before you really feel like you're going to have to go. You're able to pack everything up. You get the house all ready. Maybe even you have time to go out and water down the outside of the house and get everything set for what's coming. And then you're able to drive out of your community and go to wherever you've pre-designated you're going to go. Maybe it's a friend's house, or you're going to go get a hotel room somewhere. That's your primary plan. You've worked this out with your family. Everybody knows the rally point. Everybody has their roles, and everybody engages in this without panic. So alternate may be, well, we had a pre-designated rally point, but wouldn't you know that rally point is actually even closer to the fire than what we thought? Because again, fires are spatial. They might be coming from the east, like the Thomas Fire did. It might be coming straight down the mountain, like the Painted Cave Fire, or it might be a fire behind Goleta that's spreading to the east. And so you may have a place you've told your family that you're going to go, but that might actually not be the best place to go. So you'll have an alternative plan. Contingency is, well, the primary and the alternative plans, they're out. For whatever reason, those plans are no longer valid. And so you have a contingency plan where you have identified this with your family that, hey, if the primary and alternate plans don't work, our contingency is going to be like, well, we're going to do this rapid evacuation, and we're just going to get down the mountain, and we're going to go to the beach, right? Probably the safest place in a wildland fire. Go to the beach. Emergency is all your planning went out the window, either because you didn't have enough time, or you didn't leave soon enough, or you just made a bad decision, and now you're stuck. And typically, in a fire, an emergency plan is typically shelter in place. For wildland firefighters, we term this that we are going to go into our safety zone and abandon the work product that we're doing and get out of harm's way. So some challenges of delayed evacuation. When you leave early, typically everything's going to be in your favor. But as you wait longer and longer and longer, either because you've literally waited too long, or the fire didn't give you very much warning, it didn't give you very much time, you're going to have some challenges. And when it comes to your evacuation routes, this is probably where you're going to have the most issues, right? We don't have a great transportation network in Santa Barbara. I mean, that's just a fact. It's an old community. Literally, fire trucks were smaller when they built all these roads. Fire trucks are probably 2/3 larger than they were back in the 1950s when a lot of these road systems were getting designed. And we just have a lot more people living on the South Coast. And so our transportation network's really not set up to do these mass evacuations. And so traffic's going to be a huge issue. Even once you get out onto freeways, you could see issues like this, where you're just stopped in your tracks and watching a fire burn closer and closer and closer to the area that you're stuck in a traffic jam. This picture's from a fire that was down in San Bernardino, and literally, after this picture was taken, the fire started burning up cars that were stuck on the freeway. It was kind of a dramatic event. And, smoke and flames. And so this picture is a pretty good representation of what it's like to drive through the fire. So you'll have massive amounts of embers. You'll have smoke that drifts over the road. Your visibility would become extremely compromised. And it's not uncommon to have zero visibility. And when that happens, you cannot progress forward with the car. You have to stop where you're at, or else you're going to drive off the road. And then downed power lines. So if you're trying to get out through an area that's already been burned, this is a pretty common occurrence that happens all the time. All right, so what about sheltering in place? Well, there are some significant challenges with sheltering in place, and this would be where you are stuck sheltering in your home or in some type of structure. You can't get out, the evacuation routes are compromised, fire's already in your neighborhood, and you need to go somewhere to shelter away from the intense heat of the fire. And so defensible space becomes the primary consideration. Is the home, the structure that you're at, Does it have adequate defensible space? And then the structure flammability. So if you're going to shelter in a structure, you would hope it doesn't look like this house that you see here. I don't think that house is even there anymore. I think it got bought and rebuilt and doesn't look like that. But I always use this picture as sort of the example of like kind of the structure hardening nightmare. Like essentially the only way to harden a structure like that is to take it down and rebuild a new house. But this is really common in the mountain communities. And so if you're in a home like that, it's gonna ignite pretty quick. And then exposure. So this is a big deal if you live down in the foothills where your housing development is denser. So a lot of folks in Mission Canyon are in this situation where if the fire transitions into your neighborhood and begins to burn multiple homes, the amount of radiant heat that's put off structure fires is intense, and it burns for a long time. A lot longer than the walls of your home are going to be able to withstand. And so you'll probably be faced with the really, really difficult choice as your home starts to burn with you in it. At some point, you have to get out of the home and get out into the open area. And once you do, you're in that environment. And you can see these firefighters, well, they're dressed up in all of their protective gear, and they've got charged hose lines, and you can see they've still backed off quite a bit from these burning homes because of the amount of radiant heat. So some considerations if you are stuck in your shelter. So this is evacuation survival. You can't get out, you are stuck in a structure. This is the reality that you're now facing. So the structure itself, how flammable is it? As you can see in this picture here, this home is beginning to ignite. If you are inside that home, you may not even know that that's beginning to occur. If you're in that structure, you need to stay calm. It's actually one of the fire orders that all wildland firefighters have to memorize and regurgitate endlessly is staying calm, because you can't make effective decisions if you're not calm. Make sure you gather your family. Make sure you know where everybody in the house is. Use your cell phone to call 911. You might get through. And that gives you the opportunity to tell the dispatcher where you are and what's happening to you. Fill all your sinks and tubs with cold water. Keep your doors and windows closed but unlocked. And a little thing you want to do with your windows, don't have like curtains shut, because anything flammable on the inside of the glass is going to get really hot from the radiant heat. And then stay inside, away from the outside walls and windows. If the home ignites, you want to exit to clear areas such as the street. And there's a timing component here. So quite a few firefighters have sheltered up inside structures when the outside environment became untenable. This happened on the Montecito fire behind Mission Canyon in 2009. There was 6 firefighter entrapments on the second day of the fire. They all occurred, as many of you know, there was a significant wind shift. Sundowners began to influence the fire and pushed it from the mountain down into the Mission Canyon residential community. And multiple engine companies that were protecting these homes wound up having to shelter inside the homes as the fire burned through the landscape around them. In one particular entrapment, 2 firefighters had significant burns because they essentially had to go from room to room to room as the house began to catch on fire. They got to the last room, which was a bedroom. It had a sliding door to the outside. And as that room started to go, they realized they had no choice. They had to go into the outside environment, which was surrounded by chaparral, and it was still burning off. It hadn't completely burned off. And so it's the survivability of that area outside the home is super dependent on what type of vegetation surrounds it. So if you are at a home that is surrounded by dense vegetation, you haven't done your defensible space, this is where you're going to have a problem. When you go out into that environment, it might not be survivable. So let's say you did manage to get out in time. You're in your vehicle. Now you're trying to get down the road. This is a scenario that happened to hundreds of people up in the town of Paradise on the campfire. And I'm sure a lot of you know what happened. The entire town burned down. And many, many, many people were caught trying to evacuate. And there was some loss of life from vehicles that caught on fire when they were trapped on these highways. So this is a pretty good shot of what the difference between just a few feet of where you are on the road. So this particular vehicle is parked on the fire side of the road, right on the shoulder, and you can see that that vehicle's already starting to ignite. It looks like some tires are on fire, and then where the fire's hitting it, it's starting to ignite the top portion of the vehicle. So if that vehicle was parked on the other side of that highway, possibly may have had a bit better chance to survive. Vehicles will provide some protection for a limited amount of time until they don't. They'll typically sort of catastrophically fail. Typically the windows will blow out. So again, most important thing, stay calm. So now you're in your vehicle, you're stuck, you can't get down the highway, it's blocked, maybe it's power lines, maybe it's flames crossing over, or the smoke is so thick that you can no longer see, and you have to stop. So stay calm, park in an area clear of vegetation. So that's the most important thing. Our natural reaction is to pull to the shoulder and park, but if you're stuck on a fire, try to be in the middle of the highway in the widest area possible. If you're on a mid-slope road, so this is like Highway 154, right? Which is on the mid-slope. It's got an upslope side of it and a downslope side. So it's super important to know which side of the road is the fire on, which way is the fire burning. And in general, if you're on a mid-slope road, it's better to stop on what we call an out-turn as opposed to an in-turn. So an in-turn is where the road kind of goes into a gully or a drainage or a creek or just an indention in the topography. And an out-turn is where it kind of goes around like a ridge, okay? And the reason that an in-turn is more dangerous is because, as Nick described in his presentation, the heat and smoke and flame tend to funnel through all those gullies and drainages. And you have a little bit less intensity on ridge lines. Firefighters actually use ridge lines quite often when they're attacking a fire as a more advantageous place to do their fire attack. So if you have the choice, pull onto that out turn. If you can, pull up against the cut bank as long as it's devoid of vegetation, because that will give you a little bit of a shield from the heat that's coming up the slope. Obviously, close all your vehicle windows and vents. Cover up with some kind of wool blanket or a jacket. I don't know, most people don't drive around with a wool blanket, but if you do, wool blanket's good. And lie on the vehicle floor and use your cell phone to call 911. Again, if you get through to the dispatchers, they're going to prioritize what's happening to you and try to get a fire resource there. All right, so in any circumstance where you're preparing for a wildfire and there's a potentiality that you may not get out of your home or your property, and this is especially important for people that live in rural areas, where just by the nature of how far you have to get through windy, narrow roads, that you have a higher likelihood of not being able to get out. You need to be considering what you're wearing just the same way that wildland firefighters do. So wildland firefighters don't fight fire wearing shorts and flip-flops. They've got big, heavy leather boots, and they've got thick clothing that protects them. They have a helmet. They have eye protection. So same thing. If you're, as part of your set, you haven't left your home yet, change into some appropriate clothing so that if you do get caught, you have a little bit more protection. And so some things to wear. Sturdy leather boots. Any pair of hiking boots is fine. So anything that you would normally wear going out on a hiking trail. Long pants, wool or cotton or silk, not any kind of synthetic. You don't want to wear synthetic fabric. Some kind of head protection, and mainly this isn't like head protection like firefighters have, a helmet. Probably you don't need to worry about somebody smacking you in the head with a hand tool, but you do need to worry about embers. And so if you're wearing some kind of hat, that's going to help out a lot, deflecting those embers off of your head. And then if the smoke is getting to you, you can use a bandana or a handkerchief, but you want it to be dry, not wet. And that will help somewhat to alleviate some of the intensity of the smoke you're breathing. You're going to want some kind of eye protection. It's almost impossible if you get into that super thick smoke situation to see it all. You'll have a very difficult time keeping your eyes open. And then a long sleeve shirt with a collar that can protect your neck, and leather work gloves. You don't want to wear, do not wear, open-toed shoes. Don't have a wet bandana. The reason behind that is that if you get a particularly hot little blast of air and you have a wet bandana, it'll steam the moisture on the bandana and can actually kind of singe your lungs a little bit. So it's better to have a dry bandana rather than a wet one. And then no synthetic fabrics. All right, so some challenges. You know, you've seen a lot of good stuff today about what government does to help communities be more prepared, and all the different programs that we have. But government would readily admit to you that there are significant challenges with evacuation. So, full disclaimer, I borrowed these slides from a presentation that was done at an evacuation workshop after the Paradise Fire. And so these are from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And I'm just grabbing a couple slides from their presentation, but they did an awesome overview of lessons learned from the Paradise Fire. And essentially, you know, they started out with distilling what the problem actually was. What is the actual problem that we're dealing with in evacuation? And addressing the life safety risk when there is insufficient time to evacuate out of the community. That's like the most pressing issue that we have with evacuation, is just the lack of time. Constantly battling insufficient time to prepare, to do the set part of Ready, Set, Go, and to actually get in your vehicles or transportation method that you have and get out of the area. And because of that, because of the fact that people are usually behind the curve when it comes to getting out of these communities, we have these documented and tragic cases of burnovers that are occurring with civilians. We've had burnovers with wildland firefighters going all the way back to the 1910s when we actually created the art of wildland firefighting. So even the professionals, year after year after year, have burnovers. And many firefighters have injuries resulting from those burnovers. And we've had, tragically, many fatalities of wildland firefighters. So even the experts that do this as a profession find themselves caught off guard in many circumstances. So it's asking a lot for untrained civilian population to avoid that same pitfall under those same circumstances. So burnovers is a huge issue. And then the last piece of this is that the existing built environment, so buildings, our road system, our power lines, they're not designed in any way to act as shelters from fire. So it's a huge problem that we have, is designing our system to compensate for the first bullet point. Another great slide that I found is, why is it so hard to reliably predict evacuations? And you can see it's similar to what Nick showed, the time wedge, that every step of the way we have uncertainties. And these uncertainties, they compound. So we have weather forecasting. We're pretty good at it, but we're not perfect. There's still times when the weather conditions do what they do and we didn't predict it well enough. Fire behavior. Fire behavior is very elusive. We've got a lot of science built around it. We have a lot of good models, but it's a super dynamic phenomenon, and it is difficult to predict fire behavior. The time before the fire impacts the community, again, that goes back to fire behavior. There's so many variables that can either delay the fire spread or accelerate the fire spread. The ability of the agency having jurisdiction to notify and make those evacuation decisions, right? So there's a time delay in that little piece of this, right? And then the challenge of civilian evacuation decisions, like people actually have to decide to do this. And so that's a delay in people's thought process. And so each one of these uncertainties compounds. So mitigating civilian fire exposures during evacuation. So if we look at this column, this represents the ideal situation. Early out, we follow ready, set, go. We follow a comprehensive evacuation plan, whether it's your community's plan or a broader county plan. And even given these ideal situations, we still have challenges, right? We have challenges with public education. We have challenges with clear messaging and notification for early out versus shelter in the community. That's just the nature of technology. You know, the systems that we have sometimes break down just because of lack of cell signals. So enough time to fully evacuate before the fire impacts the community still has challenges. In these columns, this represents where we do not have enough time to evacuate. And so we can reduce the risk by mitigating the potential hazard presented by the fire. And this is things like doing fuels management within your community, along your road systems, defensible space for your structures. And we have challenges with those programs. Some of our road systems just do not have proper access. The roads are just not wide enough, and there's only one way in and one way out. And that's just the nature of the built environment. We have environmental considerations. So anytime we're doing some of these types of mitigation projects, we have to take into account impacts on the environment. And so there's a balance that we have to go through with every type of action we take. And then maintenance. This is a big one. So I know a lot of people in here live in communities that have networks of fuel treatment surrounding you. But you probably notice that sometimes they're maintained and sometimes they're not. And in some years we get a lot of rain and the grass grows tall, and you're probably wondering, when is the hand crew gonna come and deal with this? And so maintenance is always a challenge. And then in this last column, this is kind of like the emerging sort of new concepts that a lot of fire practitioners and policymakers are dealing with right now. And it's this idea that you create distributed safety zone system or temporary refuge areas or community refuge areas to give people an alternative location to go to that would be safer than being stuck on the highway or stuck in their homes. And this really came out of some of the experiences that happened up on the campfire in the town of Paradise. And so the challenges to that, to creating these community refuge areas, so there's access issues, there's property issues, there's finding a place that's big enough to create these types of zones. Design guidance, so this is kind of a new thing. We don't really know exactly how big an area needs to be considered a safety zone. Obviously, there's environmental considerations, there's maintenance, so if you design an area that's your refuge, who's gonna maintain it? And then, of course, public education. So, all right, we're almost done. So we're gonna look at a couple of slides and just walk through visually, would these areas be sufficient if they were your area of refuge of last resort? You can't get out to the area that you thought you were gonna go to, you're stuck in your community, but you know that there's some areas that you could maybe go to that would be better than the house you're in. And so this is an example. This is a pretty decent shelter area. It's devoid of surface vegetation. You do have the row of trees, so depending on what kind of trees those are, they may be flammable, but they may not be. And so this would be a location that could, in certain circumstances, be considered a temporary refuge area or an emergency shelter area. But you're only gonna fit so many cars and people in there. And so that's a problem with something this small, is it may only work for one group of people, but not for the broad community. Looking at kind of aerial imagery of commercial districts. So there's a couple shopping centers that you see here, but obviously a whole lot of fire happened. And so looking at these large parking areas, you have to ask yourself, well, how much heat came off these burning buildings, and would this parking lot have been big enough to shelter into? And in some cases, it can be. But again, this is such a dynamic environment in a wildland fire. And then when you add tons and tons of structures burning, what seemed like a huge, gigantic parking lot might not be a safe place. The Paradise Fire, large group of residents and firefighters refuged in a huge parking lot next to the grocery store, and they survived. It was miserable for them, smoky and millions of embers, but they survived. And so I think the key takeaway for some of these ideas is know your community. Like, do you have a big wide area anywhere near your community where something like this would be your last resort survival? Again, when you start to hone in, you can see that some of these areas, a ton of vehicles caught on fire. So like pretty much every vehicle in here looks like it burned up. Same along here. So in this parking lot, looks like a pretty big parking lot, but with all of these structures that burned, the amount of heat was so intense that you can see burnt vegetation in these little planter islands and burnt cars all over the place. So highly doubtful that this would be a place that you'd want to be. Same with this picture. So this is before the fire. You see this big, nice green field. But now look what happened when this area burned. So this row of trees that you see here, those all burned. And then you can kind of see discoloration on the green grass all along here. And that's the impact of that radiant heat on that green grass. So this may have been survivable right in the middle, but it would not be a comfortable place to be. And again, shows the challenges of identifying these types of areas. And here zoomed in, you can really see this field, very green, you know, it's a irrigated grass, huge lawn, and yet you can see how much discoloration there is on the grass from all of these burning structures. And then just a couple out-of-the-box refuge areas that you can see in here. So this is sort of an open space area. Looked like it was kind of green, but it burned. You can see all that black area there. The fire crept through all that grass. Here you have a big gravel lot, and that looked like a pretty safe place. This is a skate park. It's probably a great place to hang out. And here's a pool. People ask about pools. Always remember, yes, you could get in the pool, and from the neck down, you'll probably be pretty good. But from the neck up, you're going to take just as much heat as if you weren't in the pool. So pools, it wouldn't be my first choice. I guess if everything was on fire and my clothes were on fire, I'd jump in the pool, but it wouldn't be like anything that I would put into my plan unless, in this example, this pool has a big, wide, area around it, and so that probably would be pretty safe. So emergency refuge areas, when and why. So again, this goes back to the PACE planning. This is your final last option, your emergency plan. You've gone through primary, alternate, contingency, and nothing's left. And so having an idea, do you have some kind of area in your community that you could go to that would have less exposure to the wildland fire than the house that you're in? And the answer may be no. The answer may be no, my house is actually the best spot. I've got really good defensible space. I'm staying here. I'm not going to get out on the street. There's nowhere I could go that would be better than where I'm at. And that's a decision only you can make, knowing your home and your risks. All right, so we're going to do a quick little video. And this is a father and a son that were evacuating from a fire. And it's a pretty good example of how things can rapidly deteriorate as you drive through the fire. So I think the main thing that I take away from that video is that the father did absolutely the right thing in trying to maintain calmness in his son who was driving. They'd already made the decision to go down that road, right, wrong, or indifferent, so they were stuck. I mean, there's no way to turn around. At a certain point, they couldn't even back up or get away from it, so they were kind of on a predetermined course. And really, the only option that they had was to stay calm as long as they possibly could, and avoid panic, which would then potentially cause them to make decisions that were not in their interest. For example, getting out of the car at that last moment would not have been a good plan. They did need to stay in the car, and they probably needed to continue driving down that road to try to get out of the burn area. They made it out, yeah, because we have the video. So we would not have this video if they didn't make it out. So yes, they survived, they made it out, but I've driven in those conditions many times, and it's nerve-wracking. So I've actually driven through conditions where I kind of had about 20 feet of zero visibility, and I took it on faith, like, don't turn the wheel. I know the road's straight. I know this road really well. I just need to go 20 feet, and I'll get out of this. But, that's not a happy place to be in. It's not a happy place to be on a road that's getting burned over. It's a dramatic experience. So hopefully that kind of gives a mental image in your mind of what that looks like. All right, I think that's the last slide, right? Yes. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Let's do it again.
Well, that was a great segue to our next and last presenter for the day. Suzanne Grimsey is going to talk to us about how to remain calm during evacuation.
I don't know about that as a video. That's pretty intense. So that's one aspect of evacuation, but we know that we may not all end up in a situation like that. My name is Suzanne Grimsey. I work with the County of Santa Barbara, the Department of Behavioral Wellness. I want to be on the team of getting us out of here for lunch because I know we're a little bit over time, so I'm going to jump right in. Feeling an emotional impact with an evacuation order or even an evacuation warning is very normal, given the acute stress of a traumatic experience that's associated with evacuation, especially in a community like ours when we've had cumulative events of evacuations and fires occur. Triggers and memories from past events are certain to surface, and though normal, these feelings can still be very distressing, and I wouldn't be surprised if many of us are sitting here now recounting our memories from the years past. The ability to stay calm during an evacuation has to do with several factors: advanced planning, which you've heard a lot about, how prepared a person feels, what plans they have should an evacuation occur, the importance of good public communication, and of course, a tool bag of various tools for coping. Want to cover, and I'm going to try and be as quick as I can, truly, to get us out, but what I'd like to cover is talking a little bit more about emotional reactions, being prepared, our physiological response, which can actually be helpful to us in calming, and tools to stay calm. The better we can understand our emotional reactions, the more control we have, and the easier it is to remain calm. So I want to start with that. Listed here are just some of the common feelings and emotions that people experience. There's no right or wrong way to feel, but these are the ones that you most commonly will hear people express. Anxiety, worry, trouble sleeping, feeling exhausted or worn out for days following an initial evacuation, trouble concentrating, feeling irritable, increased heart rate, an upset stomach, headaches, and the surface of memories and or images from past events. During an event which has the potential to trigger an evacuation, our stress level is already raised. And then once the evacuation orders are issued, the risk for emotional distress becomes even greater. People may feel unprepared, isolated, overwhelmed, confused, Many feel confusion surrounding, as you've already heard, where to go, how to keep themselves and their loved ones safe, how to care for pets, worries about medications. All these things can contribute all at once to a mind that's already distressed. People may lose contact with loved ones during an impacted or in an impacted area. If a person goes to a shelter or a hotel or even a friend's house, it's an unfamiliar place, and that can contribute as well to the stress. Surrounding back to coping skills. The key, not the key tool, a key tool for coping is being prepared. And you've already heard a lot about this, so I don't need to go into a lot of detail. But knowing in advance where you'll go, how you'll get there, and where you'll stay. Having escape routes, as you've also heard, already mapped out, and more than one. Having a go kit prepared just takes that mental worry off your brain. If it's a duffel bag and you know what you're going to do with it, great. But also having a go kit with all your things in it. There's a lot of references to this in a lot of organizational sites online. I'll mention also for children, it's a great idea if children are in your evacuation group to have a stuffed animal, to have familiar pajamas, to have a familiar blanket, to have a book they're familiar with, also in your go kit. And know where you can know in advance where you can check for updates, which leads to the next slide on the importance of communication and staying connected to that for reducing stress. So also, as you've already heard, during a wildfire, your most important information is going to come from your local government. We started today with that. So the Office of Emergency Management, fire, law. Other ways to stay connected are to have a backup battery or a way to charge your cell phone, having a battery-powered radio, knowing when and where community supports exist. So know where the shelters are located, both human shelters and animal shelters. Know if there's a community information line available and where you're going to be able to get the most accurate information. Okay, the human stress continuum can actually be helpful for our self-protection. The sympathetic nervous system plays an important role in the body's response to stress. When we're faced with threatening situations like an evacuation order or a wildfire, the body activates automatically the fight, flight, or freeze response. The release of epinephrine and norepinephrine triggers many physiological changes that prepare our bodies for action. The heart beats faster, blood pressure increases, blood flow is redirected to vital organs, glucose is conserved for energy, and mental focus is enhanced. The body becomes stronger, more alert, and capable of faster physical and mental responses. Those in firefighting know this already. Am I reframing the stress response? I am. Because as humans, we are wired to be resilient, to protect ourselves emotionally and physically. So how does this factor into staying calm? Knowing what to expect with the body's physiological response to stress and then knowing what we can do to mitigate it is key. Paying attention to self-care during a time of acute stress is critical. Now, if you're in that car driving, it's a little bit different. But if you have a little bit more time, paying attention, embracing it, being intentional about breathing, relaxation, nourishment, taking breaks. Or, if we use the car video, yes, the father did a great job of being very intentional of maintaining calmness. Reframing the stress response of it's go time. Remember that the physiological response prepares us for action. Stay informed. And remember the importance of teamwork and working together. Relationships that are formed during a time of high stress are exceptionally strong. They're functional and they actually tend to last quite a long time. Just a couple more slides on tools to have in your tool bag for staying calm. One is to focus on the facts. It's a lot harder said than done when an evacuation order is taking place. It's easy to hear rumors and to let emotions guide and steer us, but it's critical to focus on the facts that are known surrounding the event. For parents with children around them or adults with children around them, especially important to stay calm and provide age-appropriate facts. Children look to adults to gauge their own emotional reactions. Reducing media exposure, or ideally trying to pick a couple times of the day that you're going to look at reliable sources, just a few, to get updates on the status of the situation. Stay hydrated. Remember to pause and take breaths. And this doesn't have to take a long time. This is something that could take place in a car driving through a fire area. A couple of examples of breathing. One is the simple breathing in for 3 seconds, pausing, and breathing out for 3 seconds. There's another, what's called a mindfulness exercise they call 4-7-8 breathing. You're breathing in for 4 seconds, you're holding your breath and pausing for 7 seconds, and you're breathing out for 8 seconds. So being intentional about your breathing. Other mindfulness includes meditation, writing, challenging your thoughts, relaxing your body. Visualization, closing your eyes, picturing yourself in a calming, familiar, sentimental place. Other tools, and this is something, again, this wouldn't be in the car. This would be when you're in that unfamiliar place. This would be when you're at home wondering and worrying if you're going to be evacuated. Progressive muscle relaxation, where you're going to lay down and you're going to start, or sit down, start with your toes and relax, your feet and your legs and your torso until you're progressively relaxing intentionally your whole body. Emotional expressions as coping skills include things like journaling, mindfulness, being present and mindful of your emotions, actively listening to the emotions of others, using I statements to state your feelings. Physical activity, in whatever manner works for you, is critically important. Getting up and walking around the room might be as simple as it is, or walking around the block, but moving your body. Talking with others around you, sharing how you're feeling, talking about the status of the situation, but staying connected to others. Protecting your sleep as best you can. That's how our bodies recover. That's how they heal. That's how our minds separate out emotions from events. So protecting your sleep as best you can. But staying connected to others. Just like what I'm seeing in this room today, I'm so impressed with the Santa Barbara County Fire Safe Council, what they're doing and bringing everyone together, allowing people to share common information in here. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. It's a little stressful to go at the end when I know you want to all be out at lunch, but thank you so much.
I know we're all hungry. I know I am because I did not eat breakfast. But if you guys want to stay for Q&A, we'd be happy to do that. We originally had 25 minutes on the agenda, but we can just do 10 minutes. And then all the presenters, except for Commander Miller, are able to stay afterwards. That sound good with everyone? Got some questions for them? If you guys can all come up. We have some extra mics we can pass around the room. This one, perfect. So while we get them up here, these talks are being recorded, and so if people want to use a microphone, that's greatly appreciated. If not, you can just yell out your question, and then whoever is answering, please repeat the question so the recorder can pick that up.
We're going to just line up here. All right.
Anne-Marie, I think we had a question from the audience that I just wanted to address really quickly while you get set up. Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. Jackie Ruiz from Office of Emergency Management. I heard we had a question about the county call center and why the phone number wasn't listed. So I think I heard the person who asked it back there. So part of the reason is that our call center operations change depending on the incident, and so that number may change. You also may have a city call center that's established that's not part of the county emergency operations center. So that's why it wasn't listed. However, when it is opened, we publicize it broadly with the hours, and then we also always have English and Spanish speakers and access to phone interpretation for other languages.
In regard to communication, is there one source that's the most up to date, like the website or the social media accounts, just so we can kind of know? And then also, there was mention that you might not be able to get through to 911. Is there a text or some other place where, if you need to communicate out, you're able to access?
Great, thanks for the question. So I'll answer that first part. So readysbc.org is the website that I would say all of our public safety agencies lean on for emergency information, with the caveat that if there is an incident happening and you're in a city jurisdiction, I'm going to highly recommend as a very close second or maybe even first to look at your city website. It really just depends where you live. Our cities are doing a great job of providing robust information on their sites, so I would say that readysbc.org and your local city site. In addition to that, County Office of Emergency Management, our County of Santa Barbara social media channels are great places to get information. We're resharing what other departments are putting out from our city jurisdictions, and so those are great places to look.
So I'll take the part about if you're not able to get through to 911, just starting with that happens very rarely. Our 911 lines do roll over, and we have, it's a like continually rollover line. I do want to also add that there are non-emergency lines for each of our dispatch centers. If you want to write it down, the phone number for the sheriff's office, it's a 7-digit or 10-digit 805-683-2724. And then for the Santa Barbara Police Department, their number is 805-882-8900. Additionally, both Santa Barbara County as well as Santa Barbara City both have text to 911 capabilities, which means you can text to the number 911 and the dispatch center will receive that text and be able to respond to you.
I have a question.
Hi, it's been a fabulous day today. Thank you so much for everything. Same question coming in as going out, which is, I've lived in Santa Barbara a very long time, Painted Cave fire, lots of fires. And where do I go? This is the hardest question. One egress and ingress, we got the 101. Do I go north? Do I go south? Do I go down Las Positas? Do I go to the beach? Do I go to Earl Warren? Do I just sit tight in my home? And we've got troubles, folks, because we only have that one corridor in and out of our community. Hey, talk about this.
All right, so part of the challenge of this is, as you probably all know, that we have different wind directions for these sundowner winds. So sometimes they blow out of the northeast, sometimes they blow out of the northwest. I would say in general, and I think all the fire people in the room would agree with this, probably the safest community on the South Coast in terms of wildfire is the city of Goleta. And the reason I say that is, number one, they were tested by a significant fire in 2008, the Gap Fire. Probably a 5-mile flame front came off the mountain under sundowner conditions, all at the same time, stretching from Winchester Canyon all the way to San Jose Creek, which is the creek that flows just to the west of Highway 154. So that entire stretch of the San Ynez Mountains had a 5-mile wide, at least, flame front burning downslope with a sundowner wind right into the agricultural greenbelt that buffers the city of Goleta from the natural vegetation. And not a single structure was lost, and no one was injured, and no lives were lost. So Goleta has proven to be highly resistant to fire. So if I was gonna pick an area under an extreme fire For example, the next Painted Cave fire, which is due. That is probably the next place we'll see a big fire. Or anything east of that, Montecito, Mission Canyon, Carpinteria, anywhere in there. If you can get a room at a hotel in Goleta, you're going to be pretty safe.
Yeah, this is for Rob, and thank you for your very motivating talk. The thing you didn't answer, it was on me, is when we evacuate, do we leave our house unlocked so that firefighters can get in there and shelter if necessary?
Yep, great question. So, yes, absolutely. Make sure everything is closed. Garage door, and by the way, most garage doors have a cable that or a rope that you pull that unlocks it from the motor. Pull that so that somebody can manually open it from the outside, a firefighter, if they need to get in. So pull that. That'll also help you if the power goes out, and you'll be able to manually open your garage door. That was a big problem in the Paradise Fire. So disengage the electric motor on your garage door. Turn your lights on. That'll help firefighters to see your house, to know it's there, particularly if you're in a vegetated area. Maybe you're in a little more rural area, Painted Cave, West Camino Cielo, those areas. There's a lot of mixed thought about, do you go out and wet your yard down or not? It depends on what kind of water system you're on. If you're on your own personal water system, so you live up in the mountains and you've got your own water source, and you've got the time, I would absolutely encourage you, wet down the yard. The immediate area around the house, we call it zone 0. If you get that nice and wet, that's gonna help you out a lot. Probably don't need to go on your roof. Back in the old days with shake roofs, you'd see homeowners out there wetting the roof down. Modern roofs are highly fire resistant, so it's other things that actually burn your house down. And all windows and doors shut. But don't lock the house, because I actually saved a couple houses on the Jesucita fire on Montrose Place. So anybody here from Montrose Place, there was one particular house that we noticed a little smoke coming out from one of the windows, and we went inside and there was fire inside the house. But we had the time to put it out. Normally we wouldn't. Fire inside a house on a wildland fire, we're just too busy to go deal with. It's like, okay, that house is gone. But we were able to get in there and put it out. And so do the firefighters a favor, don't lock the doors. Same with gates. Please open your gates. That's just one less thing that we have to do, particularly if you don't have a Knox lock or one of those keypads that firefighters can either put in the code or use their Knox key. So please open your gates when you leave. And Does that answer the question? All right. Awesome.
I have a question about the maps that are on all of the websites. They seem to be different, and your average person looking at that map, there's no pinpoints. Like the 154 is a significant line that you can look at and see which side of 154 you're on, the 101. And the lines seem to be very small and hard to read, and there's different perspectives of where the maps are showing. So that's just an issue that we've had. I just wanted to point out.
I was just going to say, technology is evolving, and a lot of the maps now are interactive. So you could zoom in and out, and they often have a little search button where you could actually put your address, and it'll zoom directly into your home. It'll highlight if you're within a certain evacuation area, or any other information as well. So we'll make sure respective jurisdictions will look at their maps, but I'm pretty sure most of them, including the OEM, they're during evacuations, they're interactive.
The app for evacuation maps. For evacuation maps, they will be posted on readysbc.org. That's the primary source for those maps. And we work in collaboration with jurisdictions, as we've mentioned all throughout the day. What I was going to recommend too, though, if you are having trouble with any of the evacuation maps that we have on ReadySBC, and our call center is open, which if we have a protective order, our call center will be open. Highly recommend that you call in. That's one of their main functions, is to help people navigate those maps and get the information they're looking for.
This could be either Nick or Rob. You used the term burn over, but did not actually define it.
I think Rob used that, so I'll give it to him.
So that's essentially that you're caught by the fire. So the fire burns over your location, requiring you to take some kind of sheltering action. Worst case scenario for wildland firefighters is we have to use our fire shelter, which is this device that we carry with us that you hopefully never use throughout your career, but it's essentially like an aluminum tent that you get into and, yeah, make peace with whatever you're going to make peace with while things get bad around you. So they work sometimes and other times they don't. Yeah.
Hi. In terms of the Maui fire in 2023, I'd like to ask about what's the relationship with the fire department, police department, and the energy company. How they know what to get the right message through and when the lights will be out. How long would that response be?
I am neither from law or fire, but I can't answer that question just because we all work so closely as what we call an operational area. So our entire county has regular meetings with exactly who you were mentioning. And so we are in constant communication with them. We have updates multiple times a day with their leaders, with their field representatives, getting any updates that we need from them. A lot of times we're also, we have those companies co-located with us in our emergency operations center, and so we're able to get information really quickly from them.
I'll just add, those are often the first non-first responder type entities that are let in. Evacuation zones are the utility companies, and they'll start coordinating with fire when it's safe to do so. They'll start replacing poles or doing whatever. Everybody, including fire agencies, want the power to be on as soon as possible.
Great. Can I ask a question, please? A lot of times the houses burn from the embers going in the attic, and there are those little screens that you put on the attic, but those screens have to be small enough so that the embers cannot go through them. So can you tell me what size screen? I mean, they have to be really small, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, what they say is an 1/8 inch or smaller. There are specialty vents that have honeycombs, and when they're feel some sort of heat, they'll close up. So they'll have mechanisms where, because there's also vents are there for a reason, right, for airflow. So there's always this balance that you don't want to have too small of a gauge, because then you're getting lack of airflow and they're kind of losing its intent. But an 1/8 of an inch is what they say, 1/8 of an inch or smaller, and that's something that's pretty easy to do yourself. Or you could just get stuff at the hardware store to retrofit on the inside. Oftentimes you could staple it or nail it, and it meets the intent.
All right, I did say 10 minutes, and so that's 10 minutes. They will be up here afterwards if you guys have more questions, but I just want your attention for 2 more minutes. Talk about, we do have a free lunch for you all out in the foyer. You can go out in the patio to the left. There's plenty of seating outside. In the foyer, there's some patios, there's a little meadow, but please just don't bring food in here. We also have a resource fair outside for you guys. Talk with OEM, us, or Listos. You can do CPR training and fire extinguisher training out in the parking lot. And then Nick and Rob will still be in here to answer if you have any very specific questions about evacuation in your own neighborhood. They can have that up. We have Go Earth pulled up for you guys, and they can walk you through potentially what you can do in your own neighborhood. We also have our surveys and raffle. So in your packets, you guys have surveys. Please send those into us. We have some staff members at the doors. You turn it in, you get a raffle ticket. We have 12 prizes to give away, 12 really great prizes. It will pull those numbers at 1:10, 1 o'clock. So when you leave at the check-in desk, we'll have the numbers written out, and you can go and collect your prize. But you do have to be here to collect the prize. We're not going to hunt people down, unfortunately. And last thing, staying connected with us. We really appreciate you all coming here today. It's been my dream to do this talk for over a year now, and it's great to really see it come true and see so many people interested in the topic. We'd love to see more of you at our events and workshops. getting involved with the organization through membership or becoming a Fireways community. Our next event, like Nick mentioned, is next Thursday at our board meeting. A talk by Andrew Plantiga will start around 6 about the response of the property insurance market in California to rising wildfire risk. I'm sure we've all had insurance issues recently. If not, you're one of the few lucky ones. So with that, thank you guys again. Thank you, the presenters, for being here today. Hope to see you guys all again in the future. Thank you.